NBA trade deadline week is finally here, and it has started out with a bang. Just today, the Mavs and Nets went in on a massive Kyrie Irving trade, and we are going to break that down as well as take a look around the rest of the league, see what players are on the block, what teams are buying and selling, and if there's any moves the contenders can make as they push all their chips to the center in hopes of scoring big with an NBA championship. The best trade talk around, next. Welcome back into the KC Sports Authority podcast. I'm your host, Keegan Russell. In today's podcast, like we mentioned, we're going to be talking the NBA trade deadline and all the hype and hoolah around that this week. A lot of stuff to get into. Just a quick reminder, you can find our podcast on both Spotify and on YouTube. You can hit us up on Twitter and Facebook as well at KCSA Pod. Please hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, spread the news about this podcast. We are basically almost a year into this now and have a lot more exciting things coming down the road, and just want to get this out to as many people as possible. So please hit that like and subscribe button, and thank you guys for joining us. All right, I'm going to bring my main man, Spencer Gray, back on. So Spencer, basically a year ago, you and I sat down with the computer and said, hey, let's give this podcast thing a shot. And we started it with an NBA trade deadline special. So guys, for us, this is exciting. This is really where the podcast began. And even though we don't talk a lot of NBA right now, it's actually been probably months since we've done an NBA episode. This is kind of where it all began a year ago with some trade deadline analysis. So I think, Spencer, I'm excited to get back to NBA talk today. How about you?
Yeah, I'm very excited, and I hope we're a little bit more on par with our predictions as opposed to last year. Because, we were predicting a pretty eventful time. We thought everyone, Kyrie, KD, we thought Ben Simmons, everybody was going to get moved in the same day. So hopefully we're a little bit more on the mark this time.
Yeah, last year it was very unpredictable. When we got on, I think it was like 3 days out from the deadline, and there really had been zero movement at all. There was a lot of talk about players moving, and then we were like, well, I would do this, they should do this, and then it was like silent for 48 hours, and then boom, trade deadline day. We saw a lot of moving pieces, but in reality, it wasn't a big trade deadline last year. It really, other than the James Harden, Ben Simmons flip, there wasn't a whole lot that went down. It was really the offseason that we saw all the rest of the dominoes. But this year, trade deadline started early. I guess technically, if you want to say the Lakers got started with the Rui Hachimura trade a couple weeks ago, and we'll get into that later. But today, the big news drop, Friday afternoon, it came out that Kyrie Irving had demanded a trade once again from the Nets. This is his fourth team, and he's demanded a trade from all three teams he's been on previously. So no surprise there, but kind of surprised about the timing of it. The Nets are off to a pretty good start this year, even with KD sideline right now. Kyrie's playing amazingly this year, averaging well above 20 points a game, looks incredible. But Friday afternoon, we get the news that he wants out. Sounds like they didn't come to contract negotiation terms as he had hoped for. So he demands a trade. 48 hours later, that trade happens, probably quicker than some people would have guessed. We thought this might happen, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Sounds like as soon as that went down, that the Nets want to just get rid of him and move on as quickly as possible. So let's start there. The trade goes down today. The official details of that trade: Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris go to the Mavericks in exchange for Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a 2027 second round pick, a 2029 first round pick unprotected. That's the key there. And then a 2029 second round pick. So before we get into the compensation piece, what were your thoughts Friday when you saw Kyrie demanded this trade, and did you have the Mavericks as the landing spot for that?
Well, my initial reaction was, here we go again, because I feel like we get one Kyrie trade request per season.
It wouldn't be an NBA season without a few Kyrie headlines, and this is like the fifth or sixth this year already.
It wouldn't be an NBA season without a star on the Brooklyn Nets asking for a trade. So I wasn't really surprised. I was in the sense of the Nets. They started off a little rough, then they really got going towards the middle of the season, and then obviously they've been on a bit of a skid with KD out. But I don't know what's going on behind the closed doors in management. Obviously, the contract negotiations were one thing. Who knows what the chemistry's like on the team? It doesn't seem like anyone likes Ben Simmons and all this stuff. So I'm not totally shocked that it happened. I was very surprised on the landing spot in Dallas. I thought of a couple other suitors. I really thought the Clippers were the front runner. I think they had the most to package to give to them. But I was pretty shocked by Dallas because it's an odd fit. And quite frankly, Dallas has not been very aggressive since they got Luka with getting them sufficient offensive help. So I'm surprised they finally pulled the trigger on something like this.
Yeah, this a little bit uncharacteristic for this Dallas team. They've kind of gone for, I wouldn't say fringe trades. Trading for Porzingis couple years ago was kind of a big move, and that of course didn't pan out. I was same as you. The Clippers and the Lakers really seemed like the front runners. Obviously last year, about the same time, and then going to the off season, Kyrie was trying to get himself to the Lakers, and that just wasn't possible. And probably even harder to do that this year because the Lakers have no money, they have no interesting picks, and their young players, for some reason, they want to keep in Reeves and Christie and didn't want to include them. So the Lakers made sense, but the Clippers definitely could have been a big trade there. Have a new three with Kyrie, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. Definitely a ton of offense, still pretty good defensively. I think they would have had to gut a good chunk of their roster to get him and then make some other borderline moves later. But the Mavericks, they come up big. There was talk all the last 2 weeks that the Mavericks were looking to add a superstar to go along Luka. It wasn't until the last couple of days that Dorian Finney-Smith was on the trade block. He was actually kind of the most coveted piece on that team. Surprisingly, not a Christian Wood or anybody else. But yeah, Dinwiddie and Finney-Smith go to Brooklyn in exchange for Kyrie Irving. So at first glance, let's go from the Mavs perspective first. Why Kyrie over some other potential guys that were on the trade block? In your opinion?
The most obvious is it's going to lessen the offensive workload for Luka. And Luka gets a lot of criticism for his defense, but if you look at his usage percentage, anybody in that sort of range, I mean, this dude has to carry that team offensively, not just from scoring, but from playmaking. So obviously having someone like Kyrie, who's a ball dominant guy, can give Luka a breather. They might even try the, kind of strategically placed where they play their minutes to try to get both of them breathers. So, I mean, just from the offensive perspective, takes a ton of workload off of Luka's plate. Defensively, even if their usage percentage goes down a little bit, I mean, they're not going to be the strongest defensive backcourt in the league, probably a little bit towards the bottom in that regard. But, I mean, it definitely satisfies the need of another option. I want to say secondary option, but Kyrie, to your point, has been very, very good this year, and especially scoring the rock. So maybe we could see Luka take on more of a James Harden role where he still going to put up his 20-30, but is still going to be maybe move to more of a primary distributor and just allow Kyrie to get the ball in the ISO situations, let him, get the ball with 5 seconds left. So it makes sense from that perspective. And, again, they could have went out and get John Collins and stuff like that. But it's like, at that point, Luka's still going to have to score 35 a night and have the ball in his hands for 70% of the time. So from that perspective, it makes sense.
It's kind of a weird pairing, like you mentioned. I think this does make them very top heavy now, which, if you look at some of the teams at the top across the league, they are very top heavy. We know when Kyrie is playing, when he wants to play and he's focused on actual basketball, he's probably one of the 2, 3, 4, 5 most talented guys on the court at all times. It's obvious that he probably has the best handles we've ever seen out of a guard, but his ability to score the ball is probably second to almost none. With this pairing with Luka, where do you think that puts them as a tandem now in the league? Does that move them to the top? Is it Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum? Is it Kawhi and Paul George if they are both healthy and playing? Where do you think this puts them as a ranking duo now in the league?
I don't think it puts them above either of those two because those two are both two-way caliber players. I mean, Tatum and Brown are great defensively. Kawhi and Paul George are great defensively. So I'm not really going to put them ahead of those two pairings, even with the injury concerns of PG and Kawhi. They remind me of Lillard and McCollum a lot.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, very scoring minded, and really crazy talented offensive players. But the fact of the matter is the other three guys in the court are just going to be doing cardio because they're not going to be getting the ball on offense. So I think top-heavy teams, like you mentioned, I think they can do really well in the regular season. But I think you see them in a 7-game series. You're going to start seeing legs getting tired in the later games. You're going to start seeing a compounding effect of the role players not being able to score. Because Dinwiddie was a great guy to take off some of the load, but now who's that third guy? Is it Hardaway? Is he going to hit shots when Luke and Kyrie kind of get tired? Is it Christian Wood? I don't know. You need depth along with some star players. So I would say they're going to be in a position to win a playoff series, but I don't see them as I would say a title contender, maybe Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, it really didn't actually help their odds out too much. They went from plus 1,900 to plus 1,400 to win the championship. And I think this puts them in contention for that top 4 seed. They're still a little bit lower in the rankings right now, but the West is a gauntlet. I mean, everyone from 4 through 13 is like a game and a half within each other. But it is a very high-powered offense now with those two. You can spread the floor. Surprising they didn't have to include Tim Hardaway for salary purposes, so you still have a shooter in the corner. But I do think you lose a lot of defense with not that Dinwiddie's a great defender, but he's long for a guard, and then Finney Smith's a fantastic defender, not a great rebounder or a great shooter. So I'm wondering if this is maybe the first of a 1 or 2 more moves we see with the Mavs, because they don't have a great bench. They don't have a lot of depth. They still need that third ball handler. So obviously flipping Dinwiddie for Kyrie is a 1-for-1 there. So they still need to look for that third ball handler. So I think this is the first of a couple moves for them. I was listening to the Locked On Mavs podcast this morning, actually, just to get some ideas. And this was before the Kyrie trade. But a couple guys they've been throwing out there that they could still add into the mix. They could still look to move Christian Wood somehow. There's been a lot of talk with the Suns about blowing things up there. So maybe they'd go and try and make a run for DeAndre Ayton. Maybe they go after Cam Johnson over there, Jay Crowder. Jared Vanderbilt out of Utah has been one they've been talking about, but I think this is the first of a couple moves we see because they need some more depth and they need another ball handler. How about from the Nets perspective? I've seen a couple grades come out already, and the majority of them say that the Nets got the better end of this deal, even though they didn't get much picks out of it as to what they probably could have. They only get the 1 first, but it is an unprotected first. What do you think as far as what the Nets got back? Do you think Dinwiddie and Finney Smith are the best offer they could have got, or is this one of those where they didn't want to hold out too long? Because the Clippers made a move, the Lakers made a move. To me, it seems like Dinwiddie and Finney were probably to fill roles that they were actually looking for versus what the Clippers or Lakers could give them.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably, again, I don't know what the Clippers were going to package. I don't know if it's going to be centered around Reggie Jackson or Luke Kennard or Trey Mans or whatever the case may be. I know that I don't think the Lakers could package anything that would be better than Dinwiddie and Finney Smith. I mean, you keep ball handling and keep shooting with Dinwiddie, and you get a guy that can be a primary ball handler, and then you get a pretty good 3-and-D guy, to either come off your bench as a solid role player or, shift somebody into the starting lineup and get some scoring on the bench. I think the Nets are still a middle of the pack team. It just depends what they do with Durant. If they try to move him, I'm now seeing that the Suns are potentially going to go all in for Durant because they've had a iffy season so far. I don't really know what to think of the Nets because I don't think, kind of to your point with the Mavs, I don't think the Nets are done moving people yet. I definitely think they try to move Simmons because I don't think there's any chance of that working out at this point. And they could just look to kind of blow it up a little bit, move Durant, move Simmons, get as many picks and solid players as you can, and then just try to reload next season. Because obviously the experiment at this point has failed. A year, 13 months ago, I think they had Kyrie, Durant, and Harden, and that did not work out. I mean, obviously they only played like 16 games together, but it's hard to give them. The Nets are just moving back to the team that they were before the Durant trade. So that with D'Angelo Russell, Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, they're going to move back to that solid team that could be in the 6 to 8 range. But I don't think they're done making moves yet. So it's hard to judge whether or not they got the better end out of this.
They do have a lot of interesting pieces still around. I think this team is very talented. I think you could question some of the fit. They've got a decent amount of depth at most positions other than that 5 spot. I agree with you. I think Ben Simmons is the next one I look to offload as quick as possible. It never made sense as a fit there. I don't think, he makes sense as the true point with KD. Because he takes up a lot of space offensively and he doesn't do anything offensively. So if KD is trying to spread the floor and Ben Simmons is running around the top of the key, I mean, the defense can just sag and double down. So I don't like the fit there. I think Simmons does get moved. As regards to what they could have got elsewhere, I think the Clippers probably would have had the next most competitive offer. Probably Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, a pick or two. My guess is the Nets also wanted to get Trey Mann or Zubac, and they said, no, that's not happening. And then the Lakers, are you taking Russ back in that and having Russ and Simmons on the court at the same time? No. So you're only making that deal if you have another suitor lined up for Russ or Simmons. And of course, those Lakers picks, who knows what they'll be in a couple of years. So the Clippers probably had a good chance. I also heard some talks about the Bulls. Maybe the Bulls were looking to switch things up and move off of Levine's contract. But I think at the end of the day, nobody seemed willing to pay Kyrie's contract extension. And so I think that limited the true number of suitors. There's been nothing so far coming out of Dallas saying that they intend to sign him this offseason or even right now. So it could end up being just a rental piece to go all in this year. But I'm guessing the offers were limited just because of Kyrie's off the court stuff and that contract situation. I mean, who wants to sign up for another 4 years of Kyrie with what we've seen the last 2 or 3 years? Do you have any? I don't have any trades like off the top of my head, but anything specifically now that Kyrie's off the team, any moves you'd like to see them to make? Like if you were the Nets, would you just blow it up and get the most you can for KD now, or do you ship Simmons out and try and fill in the rest of the team around KD? Because they, like I said, they still have a decently talented roster. Seth Curry, very good shooter, undersized guard, not a great defender, but fantastic shooter. Patty Mills is still balling when he gets the chance. They've got some young pieces with like Cam Thomas, who just put up like 45 last night. Nick Claxton's had a big year. But if you're the Nets now, what's the next move?
Well, I think you move Simmons either way. You got to do one of two things. You have to just blow it all up, trade KD, get a boatload. I mean, we saw what Rudy Gobert got and Donovan Mitchell. I mean, and obviously it's Kevin Durant, so it's going to be on par or more than that. So just get as many solid pieces as you can, and then just try to go into not even necessarily a rebuild, because I do think if they get sufficient compensation from them, they'll still be a competitive team. Or you got to move Simmons and try to get some pieces back that at least somewhat help the roster. Because you are right. I mean, they got talent on the roster. And Nick Claxton's probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year, or at least a finalist for it. You got Seth Curry. You got, Cam Thomas, like you said. So there are some good pieces there if you want to keep Durant and try to keep going as it is. But to be honest, I don't see this team as a championship contender with just Durant. If they don't make another move, they're not a contender. They're not beating the Celtics in a 7-game series. They're not beating the Bucks in a 7-game series. I don't even think they're beating the Sixers in a 7-game series. So you got to do one or the other. You got to either go really aggressive with the reload, or you got to just blow it up and try to start down a new path.
let me throw this out to you with Ben Simmons. I don't have a lot of trades that I like because again, I don't know many teams that are willing to take him on. But just
Right.
hypothetically here, a team that's looking to potentially make a move at point guard because they don't want to pay him in the offseason, and this may not make sense because Simmons already under a max deal. But do you think the Timberwolves would have any interest in flipping Simmons for D'Angelo Russell and sending Russell back to the Nets? Does that even make sense for the Timberwolves?
I don't think it makes sense for the Timberwolves because with Gobert on that team, the spacing would just be absolutely atrocious because him and Cat are already trying to fight for time on the post. And kind of to your point, I mean, Ant's going to want to slash down and try to get, to the rim, and yet Simmons and Gobert crowding that. So I don't think it makes sense for the Timberwolves. And I think D'Angelo Russell's been playing really well since December. He's been averaging 20 on pretty good splits. So I don't think the Timberwolves pull the trigger. I think if anybody does, and maybe the Jazz, because I know they're trying to get to a point where they're just tanking. I think it's a little late at this point, though. They've already been too competitive. But I know they just want a complete roster overhaul. So maybe they try to get Jordan Clarkson to be another ball handler and scorer. Maybe they even try to get Mike Conley to take over that point guard spot and shift Dinwiddie to the 2. So I would look to any team that's trying to just completely shift their identity offensively or defensively, like the Jazz, or and also, I mean, there's a couple other options like Gary Trent Jr. in Toronto. I know they're trying to move him. Chris Boucher, I've heard rumors on him. The Hawks are always trying to move John Collins, so you could always go for that. And then an underrated one that I think is definitely going to make some moves would be the Bulls, like you said. So I don't know, maybe try to get Vucevic, maybe try to, get Kobe White off the bench. I mean, because I don't really know what Simmons' trade value is at this point, because if you watch him play, he doesn't even want to score. He doesn't even look to score, even think about scoring. So I don't really know what his value is, to be honest. But I think there are a couple teams that could make sense for him.
Yeah, and actually while you were talking about that, I was testing a couple things out here on the trade machine. What about the Hornets? The Hornets they're not really going anywhere right now. LaMelo's been off and on hurt. Kelly Oubre's off and on hurt. They've got a couple interesting pieces that may actually fill in nicely around Durant. So I was playing around here with one, and I don't even know if the Nets, if this is, I think that if you're the Nets, you still take this. But if you sent Joe Harris and Ben Simmons to the Hornets, you would probably still have to send them some decent draft capital to take this. Maybe not, but then you'd get Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier back. That's one option there. It actually saves the Nets a little bit in cap space too, because Hayward's only got 2 years left on his deal versus the 3 for Simmons, and he's making less money. But then you get another scoring ball handler in Terry Rozier that could match up well with Dinwiddie. Hayward's kind of a hit and miss. When he's healthy, he's a decent third, fourth, fifth option, but when you need him as your number 2, he's not that anymore. Yeah, what do you think on that one?
I mean, if I'm the Nets, I'd probably take it. I'd try to get anything I can get for Simmons, and you can lose Harris's contract. He hasn't been great since he got that $90 million extension or whatever it was. And then I would like Rozier. I think him and Dinwiddie would pair pretty well in the backcourt. You'd have two pretty explosive scoring guards, that would, I think, fill the role nicely, especially if you want to move Durant on the bench a little bit. You can have those two kind of carry. And then, yeah, if Gordon Hayward plays, then, yeah, I think that's a good deal. But that's a big if at this point.
The other one I was trying to make work, and I haven't gotten this yet, but same thing with the Hornets. Maybe you put together a package to get back Kelly Oubre, Terry Rozier, and Mason Plumlee. Plumlee's had a pretty decent year as a big, and I think the one thing the Nets lack is somebody behind Claxton that can handle the pain. They can't just go with Claxton up against Embiid and Giannis in the East. So that's another one. But outside of that, I really don't see a lot of teams that would have interest in Ben Simmons. Maybe the Spurs would take him on. Because they're not going anywhere anytime soon, and they've got a couple pieces you can maybe get back. But I think Simmons is going to be tough to move. And I think at this point, I think you and I mentioned this to each other the other day, you're probably sending Simmons out at lesser value than what you could get if you waited, just because he's such a unique type of player that it's hard to fit him on to the contending teams, in my opinion, because he can't shoot.
I agree.
Okay, so if they couldn't move Simmons, let's talk for a quick second here about the KD to the Suns or KD somewhere else. Do you think the Suns would have enough to pull off a KD trade now versus, in the offseason when they had the chance?
I don't really, I don't know what they would package because I know there's some untouchables there. I mean, they're not going to move Bridges. Probably would include Aiden, I would assume.
Yeah, it would
So
have to
DeAndre
include
Aiden
Aiden.
goes. Yeah. I mean, you could do Aiden, Crowder, draft capital, a couple other pieces, obviously. I'm trying to even remember who's on the roster. I don't know what they do with Chris Paul in that scenario, if they move him. Um, I mean, yeah, they obviously have some pieces, but again, if you just gut yourself, I know you'll have Devin Booker and Durant, but it's I don't really see how well that team works out. I mean, you're just moving Durant to another situation where he's got a pretty dominant second option, but then who's the supporting cast? What's the role players look like? Is it just going to look like the Nets again? So I'm not really sure if the Suns have exactly what it would take to get Durant.
Yeah, just on the trade machine without draft capital, DeAndre Ayton and Jay Crowder for Kevin Durant works cap space wise, but I don't know if there's enough picks there to keep it interesting. Personally, I'm
Yeah,
I'm all in on the Trailblazers just need to go trade for KD. Package up Simons,
I agree.
Nurkic, Shaden Sharp, two first. Get rid of those three. Bring in KD. Have your big three of KD, Lillard, and Jeremy Grant. Slide Josh Hart back to the two spot as a shooting guard because I think he's a little bit better in that role than a three anyway. And then you roll with Drew Eubanks at the five, and maybe you find another veteran to come play the post, and you just roll that out. That's in my opinion the trade that I would love to see happen for KD.
I agree. I could see the Bulls move some pieces over there, move Levine, Kobe White, some draft capital, and Vucevic. So they got a lot of pieces that I know because it's not working. Obviously, Ball hasn't played basketball in 10 years, it
He
seems
may not
like.
ever play again.
Exactly. So, and Levine, obviously, he's had a very odd year for his standards. So, I've heard a lot of rumblings of him moving on. So, KD on the Bulls would be nice. The Wizards, who are always mediocre, it's KD's hometown. I could see them. They definitely have some pieces to play with and pair him with Beal. See what you can do. And obviously, Porzingis probably would have to be a part of it, but that's an interesting situation as well. It's going to be on par with Gobert and Mitchell. It's got to be. I mean, they set the tone in the offseason. It's got to be a complete overhaul for him.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of that stupid trade, the asking price for KD is incredibly high. I could see the Pelicans doing it too. You'd have to probably put together 4 or 5 players. Plus, they've got a ton of draft picks from the Lakers that could actually be decent picks in a couple of years. And you could pair KD with Zion, and you're probably looking at minimum Brandon Ingram coming back as the centerpiece for that, and kind of the KD light version, as people have said. But that'll be interesting to see. I'd be curious this week to see what comes out of KD's camp. Is he happy, unhappy? I mean, I think the only thing we've heard so far is that he's not really a fan of Ben Simmons, and I think that's obvious. So if
Right.
I'm the Nets, I'm doing everything possible to make KD happy and send Simmons out. Otherwise, if KD's like, hey, the guys I want, you can't realistically go get, then my attention is, all right, KD, where do you want to go? We're going to try and make it happen. No promises, but we got to get a king's ransom for you back to make this work. So that'll be interesting to watch. Don't really know. I don't think there's enough time to do a KD trade this week. There's just that would just slow everything down for the rest of the week. But let's
Right.
talk about some of the teams that have some pieces that might be looking to sell off. The Jazz being one of them, the Raptors being another. I think those are the two main teams that everyone's looking to pick apart, as well as the Hornets. Um, the Jazz, like you'd mentioned a little bit ago, that maybe they're starting to tank now. They've got an incredibly talented roster. They pull off that huge trade with Rudy Gobert, the massive trade with Donovan Mitchell. They actually got quite a bit of good stuff back. Larry Markkinen's having an incredible year. Got himself on the All-Star team. And then Walker Kessler, now that he's getting playing time, he's looking like a perfect replacement for Gobert with a little bit more offensive game. Um, they're sitting middle of the pack right now. I don't think Danny Ainge is trying to compete for a title this year, but he does have enough pieces that he really could go either way. He could go out and buy at the deadline and bring in a mega star. He could also trade half of his team out and continue to stock up on picks. So as you look at that team, who do you think? I mean, they've been pretty upfront that Markkanen, Kessler, and Ochai are untouchable, which I'm kind of surprised they think Ochai is untouchable because they don't really use him a whole lot yet, and that's because there's so much depth on that team. But outside of those three, who do you think are the most coveted, desired players on that roster that we should see get moved this week?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, Colin Sexton, I know he just got brought over there. It's always going to be a conversation. Jordan Clarkson, I think there's probably a pretty big market for him. I always see Mike Conley every single year, whether he's on the Grizzlies or the Jazz or whatever the case may be. He's always in trade talks. So they're kind of in a weird spot because they're obviously not going to get Wembanyama at this point, and they're not going to win a title. So I think instead of going all in on the tank, you have a lot of valuable pieces. Let's maybe try to bring in a pretty big star. So maybe try to go out and get Levine, try to go out and get Durant. But I definitely think I think Clarkson and Conley are going to be the two big focal points to try to move.
Yeah, if I'm a contending team, I'm calling the Jazz every day and trying to get Clarkson, Malik Beasley, Conley. I think Conley to the Clippers makes a lot of sense now since they lost out on Kyrie. And then even Jared Vanderbilt, who hasn't gotten a lot of playing time lately, but he's kind of that stretch 4-5. Not a great shooter, but a tremendous rebounder. Not quite as good defensively as someone like Dorian Finney-Smith, but there's been a lot of teams interested in him. Miami's been on the phone trying to get him over. But they've also got Rudy Gay on the bench, very valuable veteran there. So if I'm a contending team or a team looking to upgrade the rotation, I'm calling the Jazz. And if I'm Danny Ainge, I'm gonna take my time this week and see what the best offers I'm gonna get because he's wheeling and dealing these picks, and he's got a
Yeah.
lot of potential to get another 4 or 5 picks on this team with what he's currently got. But I love a lot of their pieces. Colin Sexton would be a good headline trade for a team that needs another point guard. Don't know if they quite want to move him yet. I think they actually do kind of like him with their mix. But if they move on from Conley, that opens up more time for Sexton. The other team that the rest of the league's waiting to see what they're going to do is the Raptors. If they're going to go into sell mode, they've got again another team stacked with talent that's just not working out as a collective unit. Siakam's having a good year. Van Fleet's kind of had an up and down year, but he's playing pretty well right now, and he's up for a contract extension in the offseason. And there's talks of him getting that 30 million range, which the Raptors don't want to pay. And of course, you got OG Anunoby, which is probably the most coveted piece on that team. Tremendous 3-and-D guy, incredibly athletic, could stretch you out to play the 4, can guard 1 through 5. Hasn't had a great shooting year, but you're not looking for him to be your second or third scorer. If he's your fourth, fifth option, then that's pretty good there. And then, of course, you got Gary Trent Jr., which I was really surprised they even traded for him last year. I thought him and Norman Powell were basically the same thing, and I thought the Blazers were better off keeping Trent myself. And then you've got, like I said, Chris Boucher off the bench. They've got a couple other veterans like Thaddeus Young down there. Otto Porter's coming off of injury here soon. What do you like from the Raptors? I think most people are expecting OG to be the guy traded, but there's also a lot of teams interested in Van Fleet. What do you expect the Raptors to do this week?
Well, they're a middle of the pack team that probably needs to change their trajectory one way or another. So they're loaded with talent, but the unit's not working. So, I mean, obviously Van Fleet, there's going to be if there's going to be, a conflict in the extension and he might just walk at some point or demand a trade at some point, you might want to just look at moving him now because I think he does have trade value at this point. You have like the OG and Boucher are very much going to be coveted, options on teams. Nobody's going to get them to make them the guy. So you're going to get a lot of contender calls on that. So I think that kind of opens the door to them getting some pretty useful young pieces that contenders are looking to move out and maybe add some depth to the roster, add some picks, and put them in a position to go out and make a blockbuster trade at some point in the next few years. But, obviously you're building around Siakam, who I'm not sure if he's the one option if you can win a title. So again, you might want to pair him with someone that's, pretty high caliber of a person. So there's quite a bit of different ways they could go. But I think I would probably look to either move Van Fleet or Anunoby, because Van Fleet, again, if there's going to be conflict there with front office, get him out before it really gets worse. And with OG, I mean, again, he's not going to, he's going to get you a lot of calls from contender teams that are going to offer a lot of interesting packages.
Yeah, there's been some trades floated out there that they're looking to get anywhere from 2 to 3 first-round picks for him, which seems incredible. I really think this whole offseason, the Jazz really screwed everything. Like, Danny Ainge is just a master at trading, and this is not the first time he's done this. Obviously, he did it with the Celtics and Nets years ago with that big trade. But I think Danny Ainge, the amount of draft capital he got back is throwing off the rest of the league. Because if Gobert's worth basically 5 first-round picks, then what the heck is KD worth? What the heck are some of these other stars worth? So I think teams are going to try to come back down and say, hey, we do covet our first round picks. We don't want to give you 4 for a guy that may or may not put us over the top. But when you look at that Raptors team, are there, when it comes to OG specifically, who do you think should be the first team, or who are the first 2 or 3 teams that should do everything possible to go get him? Is there a team out there that you just love the fit that would put them over the top?
Well, honestly, the Mavs. I think he'd be a pretty good fit, because you lost a pretty solid 3-and-D guy in Finney Smith. So obviously OG's not a great shooter, but he's a great, 4th or 5th option to plug in there. Great on defense, has good physical tools. So they'd be one person for sure. I think the Nets honestly could make a play on him as well. If we're trying to, again, add some depth on that team that's kind of retooling. If the Lakers had anything to offer, I think they'd go after him, but I don't think they can go after anyone of worth mentioning at this point. And then aside from that, I mean, I think the Bulls would be good, add some depth on their team and maybe unload some of the tools that aren't working over there. And then, aside from that, I mean, he's going to be a big guy for contenders to go get. I mean, we could see the Sixers, if they have the capital to make it happen, go after him. There's a couple landing spots for him, because he's so versatile. You could plug him into almost any roster situation and he'd make an impact.
The Grizzlies have been the team floated out there as the most likely. Same with the Knicks. The Grizzlies, though, it doesn't seem like they want to trade any of their core pieces away to go get him. Personally, I think the Miami Heat would be a tremendous fit for him. I think he's kind of that gritty defender like Jimmy Butler. He's physical, he's aggressive. They don't need him to score 20 a night. They just need him to fulfill a role down there in Miami. So I think that'd be a great fit there. I would love the Dallas fit too. They could probably swap Tim Hardaway for OG and a couple other guys to throw in there, and maybe another first-round pick, and just go all in for this year. He's really a guy that you could plug in on any team. So speaking of contenders, let's talk there. I guess before we get straight into the contenders, let's take a few moments, talk about the stupid Los Angeles Lakers and them striking out on Kyrie again and striking out on every trade that they want to go get. They go trade for Rui Hachimura, which I actually thought was a good trade for them. They didn't have to give up really anything to do that. And, the ceiling and the expectations aren't tremendously high for him, but I do think he could fit that team nicely. But the big question, obviously, is Russell Westbrook. It is no surprise that they want to trade him, even though he's looked pretty decent this year coming off the bench as that 6th man. There was reported earlier today that he was included in a package to the Nets for Kyrie, but, Brooklyn didn't want Russ at all. I've seen some trades floated out there, but what do you think happens there with the Lakers? Is there anything realistic they can actually go get with Westbrook? I mean, everything we see, they have to include both their first round picks and or Max Christie or Austin Reeves. But what do you think happens there?
Oh, man. I don't know, because I don't trust Pelinka to do anything at this point. I was a fan of the Hachimura trade. I really was. I think that's a pretty solid guy you can plug in there. who's going to be, he can stretch you out. He can finish around the rim. He's a good physical tool for you to use with the assets that he has. If Westbrook gets moved, I think it's to the Jazz, and I think it's primarily either to get Mike Conley, who, he's an aging point guard that has been injury prone, but he's solid, doesn't turn the ball over, can stretch. That's kind of what the Lakers need. They just need stability in that position because Russ is having a good season, but his play style just does not fit them at all. I mean, he's averaging good numbers, but there's a lot of times, again, at the end of the game, the spacing's weird. He can't really, he's not obviously not the best perimeter shooter. And if you have a guy like LeBron, you don't need another guy to come in to get rebounds, to get assists, because he can be your primary playmaker. So Conley would be interesting. Having Jordan Clarkson on there would be interesting, although you never know. I mean, Lonnie Walker might get packaged in with that. So, you're going to need a punch coming off your bench, and it'd be funny to see Clarkson back in Los Angeles. I want Los Angeles to go out and get all the players that they traded away, because the moment they leave LA, Kendrick Nunn has been playing great on the Wizards, and he was terrible on the Lakers. I was watching the games, and this dude could not hit an open shot. He's had 2 poster dunks in the last 2 weeks. It's just crazy.
He's averaging double digits for them already,
which is nuts. I don't know what it is. I really don't. LeBron tweeted about an hour ago. He said, maybe it's me. I'm not even kidding. That's word for word.
I haven't seen that yet. Wow.
Which is hilarious, and I feel bad because now, I don't know, because he just knows that they lost out big on the Kyrie trade. But I think the Jazz are going to be the biggest suitors for that.
To me, there's really only 3 teams that I think would trade for him at this point. I don't see a team trading for him that actually wants him on the roster for what they're doing. Again, Russ is a very tough player. I don't think he can be on a contending team because he just doesn't fit what you need in the playoffs. I still think Russ is a tremendously good player. I just think it needs to be on a team that's fit around his style. So it's got to be that ISO pick and roll surrounded by shooters, and the Lakers just are not that. When LeBron's your best option as a shooter, that's a problem. Not that LeBron's a bad shooter. He's actually quite decent this year, but it never made sense in LA. So I don't think there's really any team out there that is looking to really get better by bringing Russ in. But my 3 teams that I'm looking at are the Jazz, the Spurs, and the Hornets. I'm going to bring up the Hornets again because they have no direction right now. They're going nowhere. Maybe they think they could pair him with LaMelo and just go for athleticism in the backcourt. LaMelo's a little bit bigger of a guard, so they could slide him to the 2 with Russ on the court. I could see that potentially there. Maybe you try to go get Kelly Oubre or Terry Rozier or something there. The Spurs could make a lot of sense. They have tons of cap space. They are a team who is trying to tank as hard as possible for that number 1 draft pick. And if you go get Russ, that doesn't automatically mean you're going to win. You're going to be competitive, but you're not going to be looked at as a favorite to win anything. So I could see that there. They don't really have much veteran presence on that team. So I think he could go down there, play really hard for them, and they could say, hey, go get your triple-double, but make sure we lose. The Jazz do seem like the most likely trade candidate, just because them and the Lakers have done so much the last year already. But I'm of the opinion it's going to be one of those 3 teams, and more than likely – they're going to trade for Russ with the intention of buying him out. Russ seems like a strong buyout candidate because, again, he just doesn't make a good team great, and he doesn't make a contending team. You're going to have to give up too much on a contending team to go get him, unless it's a buyout candidate. So those are the 3 teams that I think make the most sense. But, again, the Lakers are probably going to have to include both those first-round picks in some combination of a younger player. And if they're willing to do so, then, good for them. That'll actually make them better because they do need something else to pair with LeBron and AD because, AD is going to, poke his toe into something and miss 6 weeks. So they got to go do something else there. Maybe it's something with the Bulls. There's been some talk there with Levine or DeRozan, but I think at the end of the day, Russ is going to the Jazz, like you said, and more than likely gets bought out. Don't really care talking more about the Lakers. I don't think that Pelinka hasn't really shown signs he's going to do anything other than some fringe moves. But let's talk about some other contending teams, and we can go any direction you want here. The ones that I was kind of thinking on are the Sixers, the Heat, and the Bucks in the East as the three main ones there. And then if there's anything worth mentioning about with the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, and the Nuggets out of the West, because I think those are the three most impressive teams. And I guess we'll throw in the Clippers there. So, any of those teams you specifically want to throw out some ideas for?
I think the Sixers could potentially add some extra pieces on there. Um, it's tough because teams like the Bucks and the Celtics and the Nuggets, they're really complete rosters. Like they have their star players, but they really up and down. They have all the needs filled. They have defense. They have shooting, so the spacing works. So it's kind of hard to recommend them even going out to make a trade. I think I always think bench scoring's important because, we look at the Warriors, the last dynasty, which was the Warriors, they had depth. That was their thing. Yeah, they had their big three and at one point big four, but they always had depth. They always had an incredibly deep team. And so, adding scoring off the bench, so trying to go out and get a Jordan Clarkson, a Kobe White, stuff like that makes sense. And again, a guy like OG, I think those utility guys that you can plug in and do 5 different things, those would be good. So yeah, it just really depends. Do you want to go all in? I think the Mavs could go all in, but usually what that means is that you strap yourself to the point where you get a really important asset that you lose some of the little things that are going to actually help you win in the playoffs. So I can't really think of a move that I'd want those top teams to do. The Nuggets, maybe, just because, they always do this. They're always great in the regular season, but then they get to the playoffs and something's missing. So I don't know if they want to go out and get another scorer, if they want to go out to get a really good 3-and-D guy to kind of help lock in their defense. Because, Jokic is not going to be a 3 blocks a game kind of guy. So you obviously need to keep your initial defender on the perimeter as much as possible. So them going out to get OG would be nice. But, again, what are they going to give up to get that?
They could just roll out Christian Brown to 3 every night. And he's been impressive as a rookie. But I
I'd
think
start Christian Brown.
he's looked good. And if they move a couple pieces, he'll get some more playing time. But I think the Nuggets probably have the deepest roster. They could probably upgrade at their backup point guard. I think Bones Highland's been good, but I think they want more of a veteran presence there. But yeah, honestly, all those contending teams, I'm thinking about Jared Vanderbilt from the Jazz. I'm thinking about Mike Conley from the Jazz, Rudy Gay from the Jazz. If you can put enough pieces together to go get OG and Anunoby, fantastic. Miami's an interesting one to me because they need to decide if they're all in on Kyle Lowry or not. If they're not, maybe they could flip him back to the Raptors for Van Fleet. Maybe they send him to the Jazz for Mike Conley and something else. I think Miami's an interesting one where they don't look like the best team in the league, but as the season comes to an end and playoff time comes around, Spoelstra's rolling out one of the most efficient teams out there. But they're missing a few things here and there. The Bucks are another interesting one to me. I think they're one they just need their role players to just play their roles really well. They don't really have a ton of space to do much with. They could move Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton, but those are your 6th and 7th guys in the rotation right there. So what are you going to get back of equal or better value? The Mavericks still are probably the ones most likely to make some moves. They've got a lot to still go out and do. The Pelicans are an interesting one. They're a very young team, but their whole team is centered around Zion being healthy. When he's not healthy, they look a little lost, but they have a lot of young pieces they could package together with picks to go get another superstar. So I think they're a team to watch for this week. How about any specific players you like that you would love to see get moved to another team?
Yeah, I like Zach LaVine a lot. I'd like to see him move to an actual place where it makes a little bit of sense. I never really understood the fit with DeRozan. I think they're 2 slashing ball dominant 2s, and it can work. You can see it works in Tatum and Brown. But again, those work for different reasons. Both of them can shoot, both of them can play make, both of them can defend. So it's just different situations all around. I'd love to see him moved. I would like to see Russ move because I'd like to see, I don't think he's happy in that situation. And I think the situation of Los Angeles is just not very good for him. the way he's currently playing. And then I'd love to see the Trailblazers go out and get some help because I'd like to see Dame actually in a position to make somewhat of a playoff run. They're not even in the play-in tournament as of right now. So, having them go out and get Durant, to get Levine, get him another guy that can really kind of push them towards contention. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, if the Bulls are ready to switch things up, then I think Levine to the Trailblazers makes a lot of sense. Package it around Simons, just send them a younger guard and just kind of go all in on your veteran presence. Before the Kyrie trade happened, I actually the one trade I wanted to see the most for the Mavericks was to go get Zach LaVine because I do think he would pair very well with Luka. Coming off that pick and screen game, he could run the baseline corner to corner and get open for three. He could also take over some of the playmaking ability when Luka's off the court. So I thought that would be a pretty interesting tandem. How about I don't have any specific. I mean, I think too. I would love to see Russ get moved somewhere else, just for the sake of. I think he's kind of gotten the short end of a stick the last couple of years, being pushed around and moved around. I wouldn't mind seeing Chris Paul go somewhere else. I never thought the Suns were really a true contending team, even when they had the best record in the league. But maybe Chris Paul could find himself back in LA, whether it's the Clippers or the Lakers. How about there's really not a whole lot to this one, but any KU players that are in a situation where you'd like to see either them get moved or some other pieces move around to open up opportunity for them. And for me, I'm starting with Devontae Graham. I thought Devontae looked very good in Charlotte, gets traded in that 3-team trade with the Bulls and the Pelicans, and has basically gone from their starting point guard last year to barely gets any playing time. He struggled defensively, and that's the main reason why he's not playing in New Orleans because they're a very good defensive team. But he's one I'd like to see moved. I honestly think he could fit well on a lot of teams if they're only looking for him to be a secondary ball handler and good shooter. I don't really have a specific team for him, but I think Miami would be decent for him. There was some talk with the Pelicans and the Mavs about maybe moving Hardaway over there and getting Devontae Graham back and one of their bigs, but he's one I'd like to see moved. How about you? Any KU guys in the trade deadline? I don't think any KU guys actually get moved outside of Markieff Morris that just got traded.
Yeah. I don't know about being moved, but obviously I'd love to see Joe get some help in Philly because I think they're top 3 in the East right now. But again, that always seems like something comes up short in the playoffs. Wiggins getting some sort of work done in Golden State. Obviously they're coming off their title contending, their title season. Them being the shape they are in the current season could see some potential pieces be moved around there, especially, Curry's now out for 6 weeks or however long it is. So he's definitely somebody. I don't know if they package Wiggins by any means, but having some moves done on that roster to get him into a better spot would be good. Because outside, I don't think Ochai's not going to get moved, which again I was also surprised because they don't use him very well. And Christian Brown, shout out to him by the way. As of 5 minutes ago, he's got a career high 17 points.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting moved either. I think the Nuggets really like him. So.
I think they're going to try and retool their roster just enough to get him some more playing time because when they put him out there and they give him good minutes, they tend to win.
Good. He's fantastic. Yeah, he does all the things that they need to do. So, Nuggets doing any sort of move to get him more playing time would be fantastic.
Oh, he started tonight too.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're getting blown out. But he looks great. 6 for 9, 5 rebounds, 2 for 2 from 3, 30 minutes. Not too bad for him there. But they're not playing with Jokic or Murray.
Right.
Went blank on his name there. Wow. All right. How about any other trades you think we're forgetting to touch on? Any mystery teams? How about, is there a mystery? I guess superstar. Is there a mystery player out there that's making superstar like money that you think gets traded as a kind of surprise move? I guess John Collins is kind of the one everyone expects to get moved, but this happened last year and the year before, and it never did. But
I want to use superstar really lightly here, but D'Angelo Russell playing himself into trade value. You could look at it one of two ways. One, they don't want to move him because he's playing well, or two, they say, okay, it's only going to go down from here, so we might as well move him. Bojan Bogdanovic, I forgot about him. That could be a guy that, if the Lakers want to move Russ and get him to the Pistons, then that could be another one. Cam Reddish, which I thought that's who the Lakers were going to go after before they got after Rui, and they still could.
They still could. It's not going to take much.
He's always been underutilized. I think if he gets a solid situation in playing time, he's going to do great. But then again, a couple other guys, Sadiq Bey, I think could get moved. He's been playing really well, and I think the Pistons are, maybe they're still wanting the tank or something like that. But I could see him going back to the Hornets. Jaden McDaniels, I think he's kind of another guy you can plug in there. Really good athlete, can stretch the floor. I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks do something. I know they did it with DeJounte Murray, but the roster's okay. I'd have to check the standings to see where they're at. I think they're middle of the pack as of right now. They're the 8th seed, actually.
They're underperforming.
They're underperforming. Trey's had an iffy year, so I wouldn't be surprised. I know we always talk about John Collins, but Bogdanovic or Bogdanovic. I can't remember which version of that it is. There's like three of the same
Bojan and
name.
Bogdan.
Yeah, Bojan. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they, maybe try to do some sort of retooling there, because again, I thought the DeJounte Murray and Trae Young fit was another one that was kind of iffy. So I wouldn't be surprised if they say, never mind, we're going to try to go into another direction. But I think all the superstars that are likely to get traded are ones getting talked about. I don't think we see any major shockers.
Yeah, the guy I was hoping, and for some reason the Pistons don't seem to want to do any business, but I would like to see Bogdanovic. That trade for them made no sense to me, trading with the Jazz to get Bogdanovic. He doesn't really fit their timeline. If had Cunningham not gotten hurt, maybe they make a push for the lower end of the playoffs, but with him out the whole year and that being a super young team, he just seems like a wasted player out there who they already signed him to an extension. Just didn't make any sense. I thought he would be one that, again, Miami, Dallas should have been the first two teams calling to plug him in instantly, and maybe he gets moved. But I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to say there is a greater than 30% chance, but still not likely, that the biggest name the rest of the week we see get moved is Chris Paul.
I could see that.
Suns are kind of in a tough spot. I don't think when they're healthy, I don't think they're better than the Nuggets. I don't think they're even better than the Clippers.
I agree.
They're probably better than the Pelicans. But I don't really know what their place is right now. And so maybe they just decide, Paul's he's old. He's got a lot of money left on that contract. Booker's not going anywhere. Booker's still really young. They could clear up a lot of cap space and go do something next offseason, or set things up to go get KD in the offseason too. So I'd keep an eye out for what the Suns do, whether they move both Ayton and Paul or just one of them. But I think Chris Paul could be the biggest name superstar that we might see the rest of the week get moved. But as of now, it is a Sunday evening, so there's 4 days left for the trade deadline. Hopefully there's some more movement this week. I guess let me throw this out to you. Over under on at least 3.5 more trades this week.
Oh, over. I think there'll be a bunch of trades. It's just whether or not they're Blockbuster is going to be the question.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for now. We'll if there's anything crazy this week, maybe we'll try and jump back on and discuss it. And then after trade deadline, we'll give it a week or so and kind of give out our trade grades and then kind of talk about how things position for the playoffs and see how that sits in the West and the East, and just kind of lay out what we think. I know we haven't done a lot of NBA stuff, but we're getting closer to playoff time, so we'll pick that up. So Spencer, this has been fun. I love talking to NBA trade deadline. This is my favorite part of NBA is roster management and roster movement. If you guys know me, when I play 2K, I play 90% of my time is spent trading players and signing free agents than it is actually playing the game. So this is one of my favorite times of year when it comes to the NBA, but a lot of fun stuff coming up, and we'll for sure dive into post trade deadline and kind of see how teams position. If you guys have any great trade ideas you want to throw out there to us, send them our way this week. Find us on Twitter at KCSA Pod or on Facebook. it's easier if you just send us your ideas on Twitter, and we'll throw out our thoughts on there. I'm going to be playing the trade machine a lot this week just to put a bunch of things together. So I'd love to hear some exciting trades you guys have. I know here in KC we don't have our own team, so there's not a lot to get excited about here, but doesn't mean you can't be a fan of the NBA in general. So send us those trades this week. Let us know what you think. Here coming up the rest of this week, things to look forward to. Super Bowl is next week, Chiefs fans, and I am in the works of getting our Chiefs Super Bowl preview episode going. That'll be later this week. We'll have that out to you guys, and hopefully this time next week, actually 7 days from now, we'll be in the first or second quarter of the Super Bowl watching the Chiefs roll to victory. So until then, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode.